Hello everybody. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to play the Giuoco Piano, one of the most famous chess openings in the world. It is played at the beginner level all the way up to the top level in world championships. It's a very simple opening, which is characterized by the moves e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And here, you can basically, white can do a lot of things, like playing the bishop to b5, which is known as the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish opening. And white can also play pawn to d4, which is known as the Scotch. But in the Giuoco Piano, white plays the bishop out to c4, and black will respond with the move bishop to c5. Now, again, this is a very common opening, and the idea of this is kind of to make sure that white gets all their pieces out via d3, bringing the bishop, bringing the knight out, and castling the king, and getting a good game out of the opening, good solid position. Nothing too crazy, and you don't need to have a huge understanding of positional or attacking play to be successful with this opening. Now, one of the most common moves here is the move d3. And the point of d3 is to just add some extra protection to the pawn, but more than that is to give this dark squared bishop some room to breathe, where it can now move to a variety of squares. Now here, one of the most common moves is knight to f6, but d6 is also a playable move. And as a general rule of advice, what you want to do here is, say white plays the move knight to c3. You always want to watch out for certain moves here. So a lot of openings, in fact most openings in chess, have their motifs, where if you're going to play an opening, you're going to have to know some basic rules so that you don't get stuck in an undesirable position. For example, here it is very advisable for black to play the move pawn to h6. And the reason for that being is if, for example, black plays a move, say, pawn to a6, then the bishop could hop out to g5. And this may not look like such a big deal, but it's a pin for those of you who know your tactics. So obviously this knight cannot move, or that would result in the loss of the queen. So say here, black was to play the move castles kingside. Well, here, the move knight to d5 could be played, putting extra pressure on this knight. All of a sudden, the game isn't looking too cool for black. Black may have to make a retreating bishop move, where he would have preferred to just play pawn to d6, bring the bishop out, and continue development like normal. And if you know opening principles, you know that moving the same piece twice in the opening is usually not a good idea. So when the position makes you do that, it normally isn't very good, which is why you want to make sure that you're always playing some kind of preventive move like h6 to make sure the bishop cannot come out to g5. So here play could continue, such as the move bishop to e3. And the point of bishop to e3 is that taking here is normally not seen as the best move. Now, Stockfish is always going to prefer this move, but a lot of humans advise against it. Why? Well, because if you take like this f file is open, and say this move is played, white can castle kingside, and you see that the rook has kind of an open file here. And the reason that this is not advisable is because now the rook has an open file, could create some attacking possibilities, again, like if the knight were to move here, the queen were to move out. And you may be thinking, well, why is this bad for black? Like, I mean, white has a doubled pawn structure with these two pawns just being on the same file. That's what we call double pawns. A lot of the time, in fact, most of the time, doubled pawns are not good for the player who has them. Why? Because they're normally weak, they can't defend themselves. If this pawn were to be here on this file, then it could be like this and defend this pawn. But this pawn is always going to be a weakness as a result of this pawn being advanced and this pawn being directly in front of it. However, in this case, doubled pawns aren't actually as bad as you might think. Say the move bishop to d7 is played by black. Then the move d4 could be played, and after captures, you suddenly see that these two pawns are not doubled, the structure is very nice, the pieces are all out, and this rook has a very nice semi-open file here, and play could continue with the move, castles kingside, where white could play queen to d2, and it shows on the eval bar here that white is up 0.9, which roughly translate to a pawn. So even though the material is equal, white is up a pawn in positional terms, which is a pretty sizable advantage, which should put him in a good position to win the game. So because of this, these doubled pawns are not good. This isn't not bad. This is an exception to the rule. And so that's why you want to make sure you aren't just blindly taking on e3 unless you have a very good reason to. Instead of taking on e3, it's generally advised to play the retreating move bishop to b6. And the point of bishop to b6 is that this bishop is still on a good diagonal. You're not making it passive by playing, say, bishop to e7, and you're not kind of putting it in a weird place such as this where it could easily be kicked out or invalidated. Because, for example, if you play something like this, then white can just respond with castling, and again, this kind of doubled pawn structure isn't too bad because, again, d4 can still happen, and then all of a sudden your structure is really nice. So because of this, bishop to b6 is by far the best move in the position. And here, again, you don't want to take, because now you just have the rook. The rook is just on this open file. The rook could come out sometime in the endgame, and it's a really nice position for black. So the general rule in this position is just to kind of keep the tension between the bishops. Just keep it there, see what happens, maybe trade it off if it's going to prove an advantage to you in the endgame. So while this is happening, black can make a variety of improving moves, such as the move castle's kingside. You could play bishop takes b6, but again, that's not very advisable. Or you could play the move a4. Now, you might have seen a lot of grandmasters play the move a4, and you may be asking, well, why is this good? Well, a lot of the times people will advise you to not push your pawns until you have a good reason to. In this case, there is a clear threat. What you're threatening is to play some kind of move like this, push to b4, and then try to start a pawn storm on the queen side here. This makes it so that these pieces are very constricted, and also that black basically has zero prospects of expanding on the queen side, and his play will be just limited to half of the board, while white can play more flexibly and hopefully prove an advantage. So the pawn to a4 move is actually a very nice move. Now you could also just play the normal move castle's kingside, and this is also a very good move. Again, taking is not advisable because of the rook's open file. So after, say, the move castle's kingside happens, well, what can you do here? Well, there are a variety of things, actually. Here you could just castle, but even better than that is going to be pawn to d6. And so if this game appeared in front of me, I would say that it's definitely between people who know their opening. The position is perfectly balanced. It's not quite symmetrical, but it's very close. The only difference being the position of these two bishops. And to be honest with you, this position can go either way. This is what we call chances on both sides, where if whoever plays better in this kind of position will probably win the game, but at a very high level, this will probably fizzle out to a draw. So now we have the move pawn to d6 on board. So here, again, a4 is also cited as a good move. You could also play the move pawn to h3 for reasons we discussed before on why pawn to h6 is a good move. Because, again, this kind of threat is still looming. And even though this bishop is here, you could always play something like bishop here, where if takes, then you get the pin. For example, let me show. Like, for example, if the move pawn to a3 is played, which is not as strong a move, then you can play something like bishop to g4. And after bishop to g4 here, then, for example, if, say, rook e1, then the move knight d4 could be played. Even, I don't know about bishop d4. Okay, the computer doesn't approve of bishop d4, but the move knight to d4 is also very strong. And the point of knight d4 is, again, to put pressure. And now the move h3 would come too late, because now you take with check, and if this pawn is taken, now you take here, you're a pawn up, this is weak, and you're in position to swing in with your pieces and maybe start some kind of attack here, because a bishop this deep into the enemy's territory is going to be a very powerful asset. And so knight d4 here is obviously a double-edged sword. If you take with the bishop, then bishop takes is again going to threaten to double these pawns. And in this case, it won't be exactly advantageous because this knight is pinned, won't be able to take back. You could put the queen in the middle, and black is going to have a better position here. So this is kind of the motif in the Giuoco Piano. You kind of want to play h3/h6 depending on whether you're white or black, but you don't necessarily need to if the knight can't come to d4. For example, if imagine if the knight was not here, and instead there was c3, and the knight was here instead. Now the knight cannot come to d4 as it would be taken. So you don't necessarily need to play h3 in this kind of position, in that kind of position, but in this position you will most likely have to do this. So these are all just like some basic opening things. If you give these moves a try, if you try this opening out, I'm sure you'll get it in no time. This is one of the first openings I learned as a kid, and I still play it. I still play it every day because it's such a great opening, and obviously you can't really go wrong with it if you have a lot of good stuff in your head. So let's continue. So for example, so here white will want to play the move. Here white will might want to play the move h3. Now here, say for example captures, right? Now, the computer doesn't exactly approve of white's position. Now you may be asking, well, you just told me that d4 is a good move. Well, now you can play something like knight a5. And knight a5, check, here, there, b5, and now you're just constantly being pushed back. And here, knight takes b3 is actually a good move. Well, why is that? Well, now, there are two knights. Look how much space these pawns take up. There are basically no weaknesses. This square is a little bit weak. This square is a little bit weak in terms of the pawns, but these two are both soundly defended by two of black's diagonally moving pieces. So you kind of need to be careful here. I mean, it's not necessarily like always you're going to have to do the same thing. So white might play pawn to a3 right now. And here, it's generally advised for black to castle. You know, ninth move coming around, it's always a very good idea to castle in this kind of position. You don't want your king out in the open, because if you keep your king in the open for too long, then you might be subject to pawn breaks like d4, and opening up the position while your king is still in the middle is going to leave you vulnerable to all kinds of attack from the white pieces. So here, if black castles, you can play a variety of things. You can play h3, you can play a4, and the game will just go on. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below if you enjoy this type of content. See you in the next one.